Thank you, Gretchen. Thank you, Pernille, for having me, and to all the people that listen in. Thanks for being here. As Gretchen said, I got an EMBO postdoctoral fellowship, and I will share a little bit of my experience, and not so much about my project, but also a little bit. So I'll briefly introduce the fellowship itself. That's not exhaustive. I'm not a spokesperson for the EMBO, so you will have to do your own research, but I will give you a few things. I'll touch upon my background and the CV I had, because that's always obviously important. And then also just briefly summarize my project or give you a few insights there, and then I'll finish off with what I think is important things, bases to cover if you apply for this, and also challenges, or one particular challenge that I thought was very unique, that I just wanted to highlight. So the grant that I applied for is the EMBO postdoctoral fellowship, as I mentioned. EMBO is short for European Molecular Biology Organization. So that's a European-wide entity that aims at, or wants to support internationally mobile postdoctoral research. And that's also already one of the key eligibility criteria that I highlighted here: internationally mobile. So all applications must involve a change of country. So that's something you need to consider. I know, for some people that they don't want that. For other people, it's very exciting to change country. Obviously, it's a big step, and it comes with its own costs as well. Nevertheless, this is one of the eligibility criteria. So if you plan on staying in your own PhD lab or in the same institution, then you won't be able to apply for these fellowships. As Gretchen mentioned, these fellowships, they're quite prestigious. There are others that are also maybe a little more prestigious, like the Marie Curie, which you will I think hear about next. They are difficult to get, so the success rate is less than 15%. And what I think is quite unique about the EMBO is that you actually have a two-step application process, which you don't, for example, have, at least when I applied for the Marie Curie. So what they are really looking for with respect to handing out these fellowship is they look at past achievements, and they're it's also specifically stated in their guidelines. If you don't have a first author publication, it's first author publication when you apply, it's almost impossible to get it. So you really need papers. And then other aspects they evaluate is the quality of the research project, obviously, and then also the quality of the host lab. It doesn't have to be the biggest lab that you have in your surrounding, but the host lab really needs to be suitable and needs to have somewhat of an edge for conducting your project in that lab, if that makes sense. And what I think is unique about the EMBO postdoctoral fellowship is that you actually have an interview. So in the first round, they screen all the applications, those that are eligible and those that are of high quality. They are going to the second round, and then in the second round, you actually have like an hour and a half or so an interview with one of the EMBO members. And these are researchers, PIs all around Europe, I think probably also around the world, that you have a chat with. I did it online because it was just out of Corona. I think they also usually sometimes do them physically, but I don't know. But yeah, then you have a chat, and you have a presentation. You present your paper, your project, and he or she will challenge you on it. And that's for me, it was a very exciting experience, actually. And I got some good input there as well. So I thought it would be maybe helpful to see what I have done prior to getting this EMBO fellowship. So this is a short depiction of my CV and my mobility. I'm originally from Cologne. I studied in Bonn in 2010, then had some stints for lab experience in 2013, 2015 in Luxembourg and in Aachen, which is also in Germany. I did my master's and my PhD in the university in Wageningen at Wageningen University under the supervision of Sander Kersten, and then I moved to. Actually, I also studied in Aberdeen. I forgot about that. And then I moved to Odense to start my postdoc here. And I moved before I applied, so we used the first couple of months, Jan Willem and I, to develop a project that I then wrote up and applied with the EMBO. So you can move before you apply, but there's a time limit. So I think at the time it was 6 months. You have to apply within 6 months of actually moving already to a new position or new country. And I think what was really helpful for me is that I did my PhD in a big lab, in a well-known lab in the field of lipid metabolism, and I was actually able to get 5 first author publications during my PhD. And as I mentioned, papers they want to see at least one first author publication, and I can only assume, but I think it's safe to assume that if the fact that I had a few more certainly helped me, and that's something to consider. So the project that I applied with then was entitled Dietary Methionine Chromatin Crosstalk in Brown Adipose Tissue During Health and Disease. So this is a picture that I actually made in BioRender for the application and for the interview. We really wanted to look at what we eat, and specifically how the dietary intake of essential amino acids such as methionine, how this is important for physiology and physiological adaptations, and how this links or is mediated by the modification of histone tails, because histone tails regulate or dictate to some extent gene regulatory function. So just to say the same thing and using a different slide, basically we had we were interested in methionine, which is an essential amino acid. That means we have to get it from the diet, and methionine is a precursor to methylation reactions that take place on various proteins and also DNA, but also on histones. And we're looking into how the modulation of dietary intake is really affecting methylation state of histones, and in the context of brown adipose tissue, as I said. And so just one last piece of data that kind of links these two dietary intake and physiological adaptations. I work with a diet that is lacking methionine and cysteine. So these are methionine is an essential amino acid, cysteine is conditionally essential. And if I take out these two amino acids from the diet, you can see here on the left-hand side is a Western blot for H3K4 trimethylation and H3K9 trimethylation. And MET-R really means a diet that lacks those two, but otherwise has the same amount of calories and macronutrients than the control diet. And you can see in brown adipose tissue, this diet reduces methylation of these two marks. And this really leads to also physiological adaptations, such as induction of energy expenditure. And I'm trying to figure out also through knockout models whether this remodeling of the chromatin and reduction in histomethylation is important for the adaptation, which in this case is induction of energy expenditure. Yeah, so what I think made the difference for me getting this grant is like I think I mentioned most of them already. Is yeah, again, yeah, you need. I was fortunate to do my PhD in a big lab, which resulted in a lot of collaboration and papers also. That's just how it is, and that's going to be important for everyone. But also, I think what we were able to do, Jan Willem, and he really gave a lot of important input into developing my project, is really that you don't want to. I think you can make the strongest case for yourself if you build really on what you learned during a PhD, and then you go one step out or two steps out. If you really change completely, I mean, certainly that's possible, but I think you can build a stronger case for you as a candidate and for you as also biologically coming up with an idea if you work on something that is not exactly what you've done during your PhD, but you take one step out and you try to apply what you've learned to a related but not the same biology, if that makes sense. So two aspects that I think I could highlight here is during my PhD, I worked a lot on white adipose tissue and metabolic adaptations and transcriptional adaptations to the restriction of food, or in other words, fasting. I wrote my whole PhD thesis on fasting, and what I transitioned to here now during my postdoc is went from white adipose tissue to brown adipose tissue, and I went from restriction of complete food to the restriction of food components such as the essential amino acid methionine, as I mentioned. So I thought, in hindsight, I thought this really allowed me to say, okay, I have these strengths, I have this background, and now I want to apply and go one step broader or move one step away from that, if that makes sense. Another thing that I think is important is the application of the EMBO in total is actually very short. I think it's 5 pages, and this includes background and why this lab is important, or the right lab to do your project in, all your science, of course. And so you really have to craft the sentences very carefully. There's no space to waste in that sense. And so really getting experience in writing papers and writing scientifically that I have done during my PhD through these publications, I think really helped me also to write efficiently and to write well and concisely. I don't know. I think that's something, especially looking back in the beginning when I started writing my first paper, it was nowhere, and very diffuse language, and this is something that you obviously improve in as you go, but I think even more so if you don't have a lot of space, this is really, really important. And maybe for you to consider, if you don't feel super secure in this, which is normal, we all start from scratch, maybe then this is maybe something to get help on. And lastly, I think it's always helpful if you think you pick a PI that you feel you have a lot of synergy with, and that's also something I think Jan Willem and I have. As I mentioned, I had a background in white adipose tissue and lipid metabolism and nutrition and fasting, which is we were more looking at physiology, and Jan Willem has really a good amount of expertise in brown adipose tissue. And also pathology. He's more focused on pathologies like diabetes and obesity, and so I think we synergized quite well, and his input was very, very important for refining the questions and refining the experiments and refining the biology of my project. So I'm almost finished. One challenge that I wanted to highlight is actually the salary. I don't know how it is really in other places. I've heard that other places had the same issue. Everybody deals with it differently, but I think it's really something that everybody should be aware of and should also fight for. So the EMBO and other fellowships like the Marie Curie, they pay more than the standard salary here in Denmark. You can see this table here, which I picked from the website, the EMBO website. It states the approximate stipend or salary that you get from EMBO. And you can see in Denmark, it's a little higher than the standard salary. So in Danish krones, it's 660,000 kroner per year. The problem with that is that I faced here at SDU is that nobody really wants you to, nobody was in favor of me getting the more money than other postdocs. And I thought this is really unfair and doesn't reflect well on the university, because they obviously use EMBO fellows and Marie Curie fellows as advertisement. Yeah, you look, we are able to recruit these, or people in our institution, they're able to recruit or able to obtain these fellowships, these very prestigious fellowships. So this is an advertisement for attracting people and then apply to those grants, to those fellowships from here. But internally, nobody, what the situation was that, okay, great, you got this fellowship now, but you're not allowed to earn more than other postdocs because you're also still a postdoc. So we're gonna take whatever amount more you get from EMBO and either send it back or do something else with it. And I said, no, this is not going to happen. And actually, this took like half a year to fight this. And I went to the dean and talked to everyone and really told them that, I don't know, I'm going to go public with this. And, you're not using my name for advertising, that you're advertising and advertising that you are such a great place if you're not going to give me what I earned. Yeah, because in the end, it's a very prestigious fellowship. You earned it. Everybody's free to apply. You earned it. So I think you're also entitled to getting what you earned. And I'm mentioning this because I think it's good to be aware of and maybe have discussions around this topic ahead of time. I heard that in other places in Denmark, I don't know about other countries, but in other places in Denmark, they had the same issue, and not everywhere people were able to solve it. So I mean, you need to stand up for yourself sometimes, and this is one of those situations, I think. So yeah, that was basically it. Just to summarize, I think it's a great program. You should definitely apply if you're eligible. Again, you need to move countries. It's certainly going to help you to advance your career. And I thought also other resources that are available for EMBO fellows are really valuable. There's an EMBO fellows network. There are courses, there are meetings where people and fellows are invited to network and expand your horizon. There are great courses available that all the fellows can take for free. One of them is, for example, lab leadership. I think that's really critical to get negotiation skills, conflict resolution skills, and people management skills. And I took this course, I think, last year. It's a 3-day course, and it was amazing. It was probably one of the best courses I've ever took so far. Obviously, the salary is also amazing. Is great. Always good to have a higher salary, I guess. And one thing I would just really advise is start drafting and discussing ideas well in advance. That's a no-brainer. Everybody will probably say this. And good luck. If you happy to take questions, also happy to answer questions at a later stage. So I put my email here in my Twitter or my X account. So just reach out if you feel like you want to. And that was it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Philip. This is as informative as I was hoping it would be. So in my opinion, this is great information for people. I'm sure we have and will have soon lots of questions. I have a bunch myself if there would be time, but let's see what's in the chat to get started with. I can see that The first one is about how many papers are too many. Because Philip, you talked about having enough papers, but I know sometimes researchers, especially early career ones, can stay maybe long enough in positions where they're really publishing a lot. Let me just qualify to the audience that Philip is, of course, not an EMBO fellowship expert, right? He doesn't work there for EMBO. But in your experience, Philip, I think you can answer from that perspective. Do you have any
Too many
experience?
papers. I don't know whether you can have too many papers in general. I mean, obviously they need to be of sufficient quality, so that's important to keep in mind. But um, I think the lower limit is having one paper on bioRxiv. They also accept that. It doesn't have to be published, but it can be a manuscript that's ready and under review or bioRxiv. I think they count this as well. So the lower limit is one. Whether there's an absolute, I don't think there's an upper limit, but I also have no way of knowing how they judged me compared to other candidates. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
I think
Oh, what
that's the kind of question too that can go directly to the organization. I think you're always welcome to ask the program contact person these
yeah, I
types of
mean, yeah,
questions.
I don't know.
Oh.
Yeah, difficult to say for me.
Should we take
Two,
I
three,
don't
I think is a good amount, and you'll be very competitive with 2 or 3 papers, I think. Yeah.
there's another question in the chat and I can
if I can just interrupt, I think Tana tried to clarify her question. She's asking how many papers are many?
Oh, I see. How many papers are many? Okay.
I don't know whether I would give a different answer. I mean, the lower limit is one. I think the many papers. I mean, we're all at the start of our career, so everything. I mean, most people, I guess, will apply with 1, 2. Maybe.
Can I clarify my question?
Yeah.
Yes, please do.
Yes, it was because you wrote that you had many papers, and that was like a good thing for you to get the grant. So, how many papers did you have to when you applied?
So I had 5 first author publications, and 3 of those were collaborations within the lab. So we were 2 PhD students stemming separate projects together. And I think, yeah, I mean, they're shared publications, 3 of them, but they're still rather substantial. And I think it was a smart way of my PI actually organizing the work in the lab. So I mean, I can go back. So you see those papers here on the left. All of us were PhD students. So Vineke and I did the first paper together, and then Antwi and I did the second paper together, and then me and Charlotte did the third paper together. They were all on this protein called angioprotein like 4. Yeah, but it was only us 2 PhD students, and then we did the work. So yeah, I mean, I had 5. So yeah, I think it's safe to assume that it helped me, but I have no way of knowing how good other candidates were, of course.
Thanks, Pernilla and Tana, for the clarification there too. Gita is asking how many years the fellowship is for.
Yes, I didn't mention that. That's a good point. The fellowship is 2 years, and yeah, 2 years full time. You can do part time if I remember correctly. And I think you can push it also. So obviously I also applied to other with the same project. I applied for the Marie Curie as well. I didn't get that one. I think that's even more difficult to get. It's a much bigger application also though. And then what people usually try is to start one and then move to the other, but they limited that to a big extent. So I think you can only push it by 6 months nowadays, because I think in the past people were trying to get the Marie Curie and then the EMBO and then that 1 year EMBO or 1.5 year EMBO and then went over to the Marie Curie, but they don't allow that anymore. So 2 years and you can push it by half a year, I think.
Thanks, Philip. It's good to know. I don't see any hands up in the audience. Pernilla, please correct me if I'm wrong. So I would jump in with one question because I think we can take one more before we move over to our second speaker. And now I just have to decide which one. Philip, do you know if the organization of EMBO, if these fellowships are primarily for basic research or if they are applicable also for translational, clinical oriented research?
Oh, I think, don't quote me on that, but I think it's everything that has to do with molecular biology. So they don't, yeah, not so much clinical or translational.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
I mean, in their guidelines, they really clearly state what type of projects they want. But it's this whole organization is focused on molecular biology. I think they really want basic research projects. So.
And maybe for the benefit of the audience, I will squeeze in my second question. And that is, did you seek out any help from your grants office at SDU? Did they play any role in helping you with the application?
No.
Okay.
No. No. I mean, I read the guidelines early, and I knew what to take care of in advance, and yeah, I don't felt any need really. I mean, they're not going to help you write it anyway. I think, yeah, I didn't feel I needed, so I didn't.
Any last thing for Philip? Nothing that I can see popping up anywhere. So let's thank Philip once again. And I will change the screen share. Thanks so much, Philip.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right, and I will take a moment. Now you can shortly see my screen. There we go. So our second speaker is going to talk about what Philip referred to as the Marie Curie Postdoc Fellowship. He mentioned it a couple of times, and now we have Lydia here from BRIC, the Biotech Research Innovation Center at University of Copenhagen. And Lydia is going to tell us about her experience in getting one of these postdoc fellowships. So Lydia, the screen will be yours.
Oh. Thank you so much, Gretchen, for introducing me and for having me here today. And yes, today I will explain a bit about the Marie Curie Postdoc Fellowship. And very briefly, what are the Marie Curie actions? So they are part of the European Union's reference program for doctoral education and postdoctoral training. And specifically, the postdoctoral fellowship targets researchers that are holding a PhD and who wish to carry out their research activities abroad. That's very important. Acquire new skills and develop their careers. So a bit about me. I come from Spain. That's where I did my bachelor in biotechnology. And I conducted my bachelor thesis in Sweden at the University of Gothenburg. After that, I decided to stay in Sweden. And what I did, I moved a bit further north in Uppsala, and I did the master in molecular medicine. And the thesis of the master, I did it as an internship at the Whitehead Institute for Biomedical Research in the United States. After that experience, I came back to Sweden, and I joined a group at the Karolinska Institute to do my PhD in medical science. And once I had completed my PhD, I could stay in the same group as a postdoc for a while, trying to finish some projects and also start writing some grant applications. And now, roughly a year and a half ago, I moved to Denmark, and I'm currently at the University of Copenhagen doing a postdoc. And since the beginning of this year, it is under the Marie Curie postdoctoral fellowship. So a bit about my project. The name of my project is Unraveling Chemoresistance Mechanisms and Improving First-Line Therapeutic Strategies in High-Grade Serous Ovarian Carcinoma using Multicultural Patient-Derived Organisms. And to briefly present the project and the disease itself. So ovarian cancer is a very deadly disease, and for many decades, the treatment has remained the same, which means that the outcome of the patients has not changed either. And that is because we still don't fully understand why these patients eventually develop resistance to the treatment. And during the past decades, we have been focusing on studying the mechanisms of resistance in the cancer cells. But I do believe that we need to also understand how the surrounding of the cancer cells, called tumor microenvironment, affects these resistance mechanisms. And for that, we need to develop better research models. And here is where my project starts. So in my case, I have developed a multicultural patient-derived organoid model. And that means that I have integrated patient-derived organoids, cancer organoids, with stromal cells. So I have recreated a tumor microenvironment for these organoids. And now what I'm going to study is how both the cancer cells and the stromal cells are affected by the treatment. And I'm going to do that with single-cell RNA sequencing. That will allow me to investigate which are the processes and cellular pathways that are changed in the stroma and cancer cells, and find drugs that can target those. So the next part of my project will be to then perform high-throughput screening using these models and relevant drugs, and integrate the drug data with the single-cell sequencing data to model and find combination therapies that I will finally validate in vitro. And as an outcome of this project, I expect to have a better understanding of the mechanisms of resistance in high-grade serous ovarian carcinoma, and hopefully provide new treatment strategies that will improve the outcome of these patients. So going back to the postdoctoral fellowship, how was my application process? So to give you an idea also about the time, I contacted the group leader at the host institution, and I introduced the project idea in spring. And we have to think that the deadline for the Marie Curie grant is in autumn. So that was quite a bit in advance. And I was very, very lucky to get counseling by the department's grants office. So what they did was that they screened my CV. They assessed if I had a fair chance to get the grant, and also checked that I had all the eligibility criteria. They also provided a workshop specifically for writing this grant. So besides the European Union guidelines, they had an extended version of guidelines from their previous experience, and also they provided previous granted applications. In addition, I also received individual feedback on the grant application, and also I had assistance with the online system. And I think that was very, very, very valuable. From my side, I wrote the grant, and that was done in an active communication with the group leader. And I started that in summer. And then, of course, there was the revision. So both with the group leader and also getting feedback from the grants office. And that went all the way until the deadline for submission. And then I had to wait for the results until spring. So this whole process was one full year. When it comes to the strength of my application, or what do I think made my application strong? So as I mentioned at the beginning, one of the criteria of this postdoctoral fellowship is that you need to conduct your research abroad. And in my case, I already had experience in mobility and being in international context. So I think that helped. I also had one first authorship. So that came from my main PhD project, but also had several peer-reviewed publications, both original articles and reviews in high-profile journals. In that I had participated as a part of collaborations. When it comes to the application itself, so I got feedback from the reviewers, and what they claimed that was good about the application was that it was innovative, ambitious, and strong. So both me and the host group, we had preliminary data and established methods. And what we were suggesting was to use them in a new way, combine them. And that made the proposal very sound. I also provided a detailed description of the risks of the project and then sound management strategies. And also, I specified a lot about the scientific and societal impact of the project. Not just say I'm going to cure cancer, but actually give specific details on how am I going to achieve these objectives and these impacts. I was also very lucky to be able to use an already established international and interdisciplinary network from the group leader, and that brought the interdisciplinary part into the application, which is also a very valuable concept in the Mercury grant. And what was also valuable in my application was that the host institution had or was described as an excellent environment, having very good resources, as it is already part in many new projects. And what are my 10 tips for your application? If you decide to apply for the Marie Curie postdoctoral fellowship, I would say start early. I know it's a cliche, but as you heard, it can take up to 1 year, like the whole process is long. You need to develop an exciting project idea and get feedback from colleagues. You need to hear what you don't want to hear about your idea, and you need to use that to improve it. You need to find a host institution and a group leader that complement you or your skills. And for that, I would just say use your network. You should be active when communication with the host institution. Have scientific discussions with the group leader and their network. It's very, very important. You will learn to have a different approach into your idea. And that will also bring part of the interdisciplinary aspect into the application. Find out if there is a grants office at the host institution and whether they provide help with the application. In my case, I think this made a huge difference. So I definitely recommend getting help. Get hold of previous granted applications. So once you have your very solid project idea, it's going to be relatively easy to write the scientific part of the application. But then there is also all the non-scientific parts. And for that, I think it's very good to have a model that you can refer to. Learn how to make your project interdisciplinary. Is there any technique that you want to learn? Is there any people that you want to work with as collaboration? I think this is very good to have in mind because that will help also make your project interdisciplinary. Also suggest that you set time for writing and time for disconnecting from the application. You need to find a balance. At some point, you don't read anymore. The information is in your brain and you don't see if there is something that can be improved or not. So just stay away from the application for a while and then go back to it and try to see it with open eyes. Ask for feedback on the scientific part of the application from colleagues who work on different topics. I think this is important because the reviewers of the application do not necessarily have the same expertise as you in the project that you are proposing. So if anyone with a different background or similar background can understand exactly what you're suggesting and see the value of your project, I think that is very, very important. And finally, be ambitious, be open to new ideas and approaches, and take risks. But you should always have a solid backup plan. So with that, I will finish my presentation, and I thank you all for your attention.
Great, fantastic. Thank you so much, Lydia. I loved the 10 tips slide. That's wonderful. I think many could do that about many different aspects of their research careers so far, right? We have a lot of nice feedback to be able to give. That's great. So now we have plenty of time to take a few questions, and I can see that there's one already in the chat from Heloise. How much did your proposal change after you discussed with the group leader?
Well, I would say it was not a one-time discussion. We were discussing it quite often and quite frequently. The basic idea, the background did not change, but the additional parts that made the proposal rich and whole, that was what came from this kind of discussion. So I think that was very important.
I guess it's the ongoing nature of that, which establishes also the relationship for when you join the lab as well. So you've already started off on a strong scientific relationship. Okay, any other questions from the audience? I jotted down 2, and we'll see if that jogs any other ideas from the audience. Philip had mentioned for the EMBO fellowship that there is this grace period of about 6 months from when you apply and when you move to the new country. So in other words, you could actually move first and then apply. Do you have any idea if it's similar for the Marie Curie applications?
Yes, it is. I think it's also 6 months.
6 months too. So it's okay to actually move first.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I wondered how long the application is. Philip also mentioned, I think the EMBO one is actually fairly short, but maybe the Marie Curie one is a bit longer and more involved. Was that your experience?
Yeah. So for the Marie Curie, the scientific part is 10 pages already. And then you have the ethics part and the part of your CV and motivation. So at the end, I think it became some 30 pages.
For one postdoc fellowship grant. I mean, that's a typical EU, right? Yeah. Okay. Any other questions from the group? Yeah, there's one that popped in from Antonia. And she's wondering, how difficult was it to find your host group leader for your project idea?
Well, I think I had the idea in my head, and then I just looked a bit around in my network or the people that work in the same field. And in the Nordic countries, it's not that big. So either you have collaborated with them already, or I mean, there's not so many options. So I found a group leader that I thought was doing very interesting research using very interesting models that would make my project idea richer. And so I contacted him, and it was kind of my only goal. It was that or nothing. So I'm very happy that it worked out. But I wouldn't say it was difficult, no.
It does sound a lot like it is within a network, though. So it does, it matters. Building your network as an early career researcher is absolutely essential for even when it comes to finding your postdoc project and your postdoc fellowship. Demi has a question, and it says, did you have a contingency plan for if the grant was not accepted since you had already moved?
Yeah, so at the beginning, it was actually the opposite way. So the only way for me to move was if I would get a grant. So I had been applying to different grants, but I was very lucky that the group got some funding so I could move before. And then actually I could extend a bit the time in the group because I could use their funding first and then postpone the start of my grant.
For how long could you postpone? What are the rules there?
You can postpone for up to 1 year.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, any other questions from the group? I don't see anything else popping up in the chat, and I don't see any raised hands. So I think that's an indication that we need to say thank you and congratulations so much to Lydia. And it's wonderful you could be here to share your experience. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, we have one more speaker for today. and her name is Elise Needham. And I see her video is on now as well. That's great. Hi, Elise. Nice to see you. I met Elise this past summer at our DDEA summer school, where Elise was one of the speakers. And in the process of bringing her as a speaker at the summer school, we learned that she has been awarded the Schmidt Science Fellowship. And Elise is located at the University of Cambridge. And she is here to tell us what the Schmidt Science Fellowship is and what her experience is in applying for it, and what she thinks made the difference in getting it. So Elise, the screen is yours.
Thank you, and nice to see you again, Gretchen. I do apologize, I didn't have the chance to see the earlier talks today, so I am sorry if I repeat a little bit of the same facts, but I'll just take you through my experience of applying for the Schmidt Science Fellowship. So start with slideshow. Just checking that you can see my screen. Seems okay.
Yes, it looks good.
So just to note that the fellowship asked me to cover before speaking today, and I've conveniently, oh, here we go, just move the zoomed handle. So just to let you know, I'm not speaking on behalf of Schmidt Science Fellows, and I'm just sharing my individual experience here today. And so I was asked to just introduce myself quite briefly. And so I'm Elise. You might be able to tell I'm originally from Australia. So I did my PhD, and this is a nice, beautiful beach in Sydney. And it was at the University of Sydney in this place called the Charles Perkins Centre, and I studied phosphorylation in insulin resistance and exercise. And so now it's definitely not this sunny today, but I'm at the University of Cambridge, and we work near the hospital here in this Heart Institute. And in this new institute, I'm training up in genomics to try and bring the two fields together. And sorry, this is a little pixelated, but I thought I'd just give you a little reality check before diving into this shiny fellowship that I've been awarded, just to let you know that I definitely got a few rejections. And so I wrote up a lot of applications during my PhD as I was writing up to apply for fellowships. Many of these are Cambridge University colleges, so it does kind of explode the number. But the first 3 I got back were all rejections. And then some shortlisting started coming through, and then eventually some offers. And so I guess I kept saying that you need to buy a lot of lottery tickets to win the lottery, but yeah, take it as you will. Maybe it's personal choice of how many you want to apply for. So Schmidt Science Fellows is a partnership between Schmidt Futures, which is Eric Schmidt, the former CEO of Google, and Wendy Schmidt, and the Rhodes Trust based in Oxford. And so they're really focused on interdisciplinary science with kind of global impact, and also a global fellowship. So they try and find fellows from all over the world, and it's around 30 each year in any field of science. And they're looking for really kind of bold, big scientific questions, and a lot of character and leadership as well, which I'll get into, and focus on hosting the community of the fellows once they come together. And so I just filled up lots of photos from our experience over the year. It's been I've been very lucky to have this chance. Because they do offer quite a lot. So it's a 12 to 24 month postdoc placement, and a large component of it is that they want you to change your field. And so this is to go into a lab in a different field to what you did your PhD in. And the reasoning is that you can come at it from a different perspective, and they don't mind afterwards if you go back to your original field, stay in your new field, or bring them together. But they really want you to dabble in these different fields to try and do some creative science. And the eligibility is within the year after your PhD completion. That's when you need to apply. So it's kind of, it opens once a year, and technically you only have 1 year that's that you would be eligible for. So just make sure to look out for the dates online and plan ahead of when there's an, I'll get to it later, but the application timelines and things like that. So another part of this fellowship is that there's this global meeting series. So they're really focused on bringing all the fellows together and building a kind of community between the 30 of us. And so there's 3 global meetings over the first year of the fellowship. And so one of ours, a lot of them are US based. So we had one in Northern California, one in Arizona, and one in Singapore. But we actually, I think it was a COVID rebound. We had an extra 2 trips that we were compulsory. So we also went to Boston and we're off to Chicago next week. So it is something to think about. It's quite big travel demands, and particularly with wet lab work, say if you're doing, I don't know, doing stem cell models, it's 100 days of cells or something, it might be really difficult to get that time out of the lab, just to think about. And there is a major focus on this kind of a lot of training in these 3-week series. So they do a lot of professional development, a lot of personal development in different training things. So I think they try and choose people who seem like they might be interested in closing their science lab books for 3 weeks in the end, really focusing on, I guess, what it means to be a scientist in other ways. There's mentoring. So we get assigned an academic council member who mentors us for the first year once a month and then once every 2nd month. And then they say that we're Schmidt Fellows for life, even though the fellowship, the salary lasts for 2 years. So they bring us together once a year, I guess, definitely for a meeting that's no longer compulsory, but they do fund it. And I guess there's a lot of interaction and they try and do community building still. And I should mention, this is a fairly new fellowship. So our cohort was the 5th year that it's run. And so I think it's becoming a little bit better known. A lot of people, when I first was awarded it, I was just like, what's that? Yeah, you can see these global meeting trips, they're a lot of fun. And great friends made and learn a lot of different aspects to science than we normally would. And so my experience applying, there's 3 stages. So there's an internal application, and what this means is that the university where you did your PhD in is allowed to nominate, they say a small number, I don't know how many. So maybe you get, for example, like each university can nominate 3 people or something. So then you apply internally through your university, and I guess the downside is each university has their own method of selecting people. So I was at the University of Sydney, so any advice that I give might not be too relevant, but yeah, so that's the first stage. And then the second stage is a online written application. And so the kinds of things, a lot of it is fairly standard. So a project idea. The thing is, since they're asking you to change your field, they're not expecting details. They're looking more for kind of a big creative vision here. So they don't care about how much salt is in your buffer. They care about the project, if it's innovative, if it could have really big impact, if it happened to be successful. And I think high risk, interdisciplinary, that kind of thing. They also, out of all of the applications that I did, this was definitely the heaviest on personal statements, which was something that was really quite new to me. So it took me a long time to kind of reflect. And so a lot about, I think they're trying to assess kind of what motivates people and character to try and select. And letters of recommendation, which I guess is fairly standard. And then finally, they go through the application and then there's an interview. And so the written application, I think, is meant to be kind of like an expert panel vaguely in the field, whereas the interview, they describe it as with senior figures from academia, business, and society. So it's a huge spread, and you definitely need to explain, well, I say you definitely need to. I decided to make sure to explain my research as clearly as possible to, I guess, what you could treat as a lay audience, because you want everyone to, or I wanted everyone to be on the same page with the research and understand it so that we could talk about it and communicate why it might be an important project to fund. And so the most important thing that I focused on during the application process was these selection criteria. And so I think most funding bodies do kind of share a criteria or a funding remit. And something that I've made sure to try and do when I've been applying is really think hard about that, and in answers demonstrate with tangible examples how I fit each and using the keywords and things like that. So some of these criteria are fairly standard for other fellowships, like say academic achievement. Then they kind of go on to things that are a little bit different and not normally assessed in these fellowships. Like they're looking for curiosity and creativity. They're looking for collaborative history. So this could be something to think about if you're earlier on and you're not quite finished your PhD, maybe just setting up some collaboration. If this is something that really screams to you as something you'd want to apply to. And then looking to make the world a better place and looking for kind of character traits. So an important point that I just didn't go on then is alignment with the program. And I think since there's these kinds of requirements that they have, like compulsory global meetings, that they are looking for someone who would be engaged in the global meetings. And I think I have another slide. Yeah, here we go. Here's just some more global meetings. We have, this was back with a workshop on managing difficult conversations. So this is the kind of thing that it can be difficult to pause an experiment that's running and think, okay, now I need to go and figure out how to manage difficult conversations. But I found it really enjoyable, and I feel like I learned a lot. And they require you to get up and, you know, actively participate in the kind of, this is a science communication workshop, and also watch your peers and enthusiastically cheer them on. And so these kinds of things, it is a big requirement on time. And so, yeah, I think they're looking for people who are really interested in doing this kind of external training. And also the pivot is difficult, you know, so it's something to consider. It might not suit everyone. Maybe you totally love what you do and you want to be a major expert in that, and that's totally fine as well. This particular fellowship is looking for a pivot. So, but yeah, other fellowships look for different things, and I think they're just looking for people who are interested in doing a pivot, and that their project they propose represents a pivot, a change in field. And just a little bit more on the process. So the way that I approach the application, the website is really useful. It has so many details. It has this kind of big PDF with all these instructions. I found that was all I really needed, and I just read over it a lot and looked closely at the criteria. I allowed quite a bit of time for this application. I think it took me maybe, yeah, a little longer than the others. And I think that's because of the personal statements. I needed to do quite a few drafts because I think the first one I wrote was really not very good. So yeah, being self-critical and trying to make it a little better. This is something I didn't do. I didn't message any current or former fellows. I know there's something, as soon as you get selected, you get warned that you might get contacted by quite a few people online. I found all the info I needed was in the instructions, and these fellows, we get messaged a lot, and we get explicitly told that we can't really share information. And the other thing is, I guess, the personal statements, really, I think if you look at someone else's, it might do harm rather than good, if that makes sense. But yeah, anyway, this webinar hopefully helps as well. And then the interview, I specifically went through each of the criteria and tried to think of examples of how I would fit it. And I did one practice interview with my PhD supervisor, and I actually did really badly. But that was a good learning curve. I think I got out all the kind of jitteriness and shakiness there, and yeah, thinking back on it, I don't know how I went in with any confidence after bombing that interview, but I think I just practiced a lot more and thought about the criteria, just practiced by myself. Yeah. And so maybe that was quite quick. 1 second, let's see what the time is. It's fairly quick. But yeah, if you have any questions, I'm happy to go more in depth. Just give you a little quick tour of Schmidt Science Fellows.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Elise. No problem with being quick. It leaves some time for questions for sure. And I love your picture from Arizona. I just returned home from Arizona.
It's such a lovely place. It was my first
Nice.
time visiting.
Yeah, nice to see it again. So Elise has a few minutes for questions, and then I will give you all a bit of a summary, and I will already warn Philip and Lydia and Elise that I will have one more final question for you all at the end, so don't go away. But please, any questions for Elise, please raise your hand or write them in the chat. I don't see any popping up yet, so that means that I get to start, and I jotted down 2 questions that I can ask. I really like that this fellowship provides you with a network, and they really get you involved with that network, so your fellow grantees. And I wonder if you see any future use for that group. How diverse are you? How similar are you? In what ways might you interact after the fellowship, after the postdoc?
So some of them I message every day. So we're now kind of best friends. So I think there's so many aspects to this. A lot of it is, it's a difficult year being a postdoc. I don't know, I just flag it. It's so moving countries, starting a new field, but even if you weren't, you know, starting a new lab, setting up in a new city and making some friends. All of this is quite hard, and especially science tends to not go to plan. You might not know how it might not go to plan, but things tend to go wrong. So there's this cohort of people who started in a really similar situation all across the world, who are going through the same thing and have similar values. That's kind of what we were selected on. And it was pretty amazing. We all turned up and we kind of instantly best friends. It's like, how did you guys select us to be friends? But so that's the first point, support. The second one is collaboration. So we cover, each of us, at least in my cohort, have a different field. So we all bring different expertise to the table, and it does range from, say, quantum physics to cell signaling. But I think their goal is to get us to collaborate, and particularly in ways that you wouldn't expect. So there are people much closer in field as well, say like immunology, and so you could study cell signaling of immunology. And they give actually seed grants out to us when we become senior fellows. So I don't know the amount yet, just because I'm not that stage yet. But they call them catalyst grants. And the condition is that it needs to be at least 2 different Schmidt fellows, I guess, from different fields, propose a project together, and then they get seed funding to do it. And then I think since they think it's a lifelong fellowship, I guess we'll see how else the network emerges in that time. But yeah,
time will tell. That's a really interesting approach, though, with the Catalyst grants, Catalyst fellowships. And can you have collaborators in that are also not Schmidt fellows? So as long as you have 2 Schmidt fellows, can you have others?
I think it's only for Schmidt fellows. So I think, you know, listed on the grant, but I'm sure they wouldn't mind if the collaborative work involved other people.
We'll take a question from the chat. We have Fernando, who is asking if you could explain if the fellowship is only for the natural sciences.
Good question. I looked back on the eligibility criteria, so it's on the website. So I think they say something like natural sciences, mathematics, and computer science, and engineering. But I think they have in the FAQs, they go further into different fields. Say, for example, I think they don't fund social sciences. But it's definitely covered in the FAQ, and I trust them, not me, on that one.
Yeah. And Heloise has a somewhat related question, but a bit different. how interdisciplinary should the project be? Does it have to mix different natural sciences like physics with chemistry, or can it stay within one branch of natural science and, for example, bring together two very different areas in biology?
Yes. So I've seen projects that bring together different areas within biology. So it's definitely possible. I think they tend to, I think there's probably like an optimal curve for them of pivot. So say if I went to aeronautical engineering, they'd just be like, are you sure? But if it's too close, it might just be slightly less likely, but some of them might still get through. But there's this kind of like happy medium where it's a pivot that seems achievable with a bit of hard work, but not crazy, but also I think they are looking for a provable pivot. I'm sorry if that's not a good answer. So my answer is maybe.
My follow-up there, and I'm sorry if I missed this, if you said it earlier, is are they set up to be a little bit of a sounding board for applicants before the applicants apply? So could you kind of call them up and say, how does this sound?
I think they have a webinar that has Q&A at the stage when you get to the online application stage. So I think that would definitely be a good question. And you could probably email them as well. I think they share an email address for that particular project. And then once you get selected, then they also mentor you. I forgot to mention this. They mentor you on choosing your lab that you go and work in. So you don't actually need to decide on that lab when you apply. And part of the application is you propose 3 potential labs, but you're not tied to any of them, and you don't need letters from any of those people. You don't even actually need to reach out to them at the application stage. And then they'll mentor you through selecting a lab, since they like to focus on, and maybe this is just an important point in general, checking that the lab is a good environment for you. So talking to past members and current members and just trying to get a bit of a vibe check if it's a healthy working environment. And yeah, on the topic and things like that.
What an interesting approach, and quite different from what we heard from Lydia and Philip as well. Speaking of Lydia and Philip, does anyone have any questions for any of our 3 speakers today? Anything you want to weave in and compare? Nothing is coming up, but I will give them another minute, because what I did was I wrote down a few key points, and I thought I could just tell everyone what kind of my ears heard as our 3 speakers were talking. I think each of our speakers gave this beautiful list of tips and experience that everyone should really kind of digest and take in. So not taking anything away from that, but a couple of the ones that I heard that were especially important to my ears. One was about writing efficiently and writing well. This is so important. I think whether you have a short application or a long application, every sentence can really make a difference. I think it's also a key point to consider what support services you have, and if there's a grants office that you can use, and if you need them, and definitely to not be shy reaching out and asking for advice, because getting that external input into your application will make a very big difference. We also heard mobility come up multiple times this afternoon, and we also heard differences in project focus. I think Philip was telling us move a little bit away from your PhD field, and then we heard the drastic one from Elise, completely pivot away. So it's really important to look at the funder and what they want. And along those lines, looking at the funder to see what words do they use, what are their key words, and how can I give them back their own language. Of course, you don't plagiarize what they write, but you give them back a bit of what they want to hear. And then you practice. So I understood from Philip and from Elise that there is an interview that is involved in each, and that practice is extremely important. Lydia, you didn't have an interview for the Marie Curie, right?
No.
No. Okay, so I think we are ready to close up, and I think the best way to close up is to ask all three of our speakers, and they can answer in the order that they presented, to please tell us one last word of advice, one last tip, one last reflection, maybe what was most important for you. What's the last message you want to give to people before they log off? So Philip.
Yeah, reflection. I think one thing that I would say, and also Lisa kind of mentioned it in passing, I think you just I mean, coming out of your PhD and then trying to take the next step and trying to come up with something exciting and then important, I think is in itself very daunting. And so reflecting on ideas and the writing process, I think the first attempts, they're always going to suck. So I think you just need to be bold and go for it and try to, believe in yourself and try to push through and get a draft done and then improve on the draft and step by step sort of. And I don't think this is super revolutionary what I'm saying, but I think there's this I don't know. I mean, I can say I was very stressed at times as well, and So, and in the end, the three of us, they made it in with our applications.
But if you don't believe in yourself, then you're not even in the running, right? You have to push through, believe in yourself.
And it's all about practice. So you got to start somewhere. I think that's what I would say.
It's very nice. And Lydia, how about you?
I would say it's very important to keep in mind that these applications take time. It's not something that you can do in 2 weeks if you want to have a good application. So just be sure that you have the time to meet the deadline and have a strong application, because otherwise it's a lot of work for nothing.
That's such a good point. These are competitive. Yep. Very nice. And Elise, how about you?
Advice would be to be kind to yourself. So these fellowships, they're difficult and they take some time. You feel like you're pouring your heart out into this thing, and rejection is fairly common. I had a lot of rejection, and so I think remembering that, and there's a couple things, and also writing a fellowship application can help you clarify your thinking, even if you don't win the fellowship. So it's not time wasted. It can also help you think more clearly, practice for the next time. Maybe you can reuse some parts. And then also, I think just celebrate submitting as well. I would always make sure I do something nice for myself each time I submitted a fellowship application, because that in itself is a bit of an achievement. And I think if you focus on the process a little bit and celebrate achieving, be kind to yourself, do something nice when you submit, then it makes the process, at least for me, seem a little bit better.
Also a very lovely suggestion and really important advice too. So I want to end by saying congratulations to all three of you, and also a very big thank you to you for spending time with us today to help inform everyone else and help motivate everyone else too. And thank you so much to our audience for joining, for asking questions, and for just being present and listening. Next week, we will have a similar webinar, and we will focus on national funders, Danish national funders. So please feel free to join us for that webinar as well. So I will say goodbye and thank you all.